Hey, good morning, Northeast. Good to see everybody here. Glad you're joining us at home or whatever it is that you're streaming a service. Come on your feet. Let's worship this morning. Oh, we look to the sun, set our eyes on our Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Oh, we look to the sun. Oh, we look to the sun. Salvation tearing through the dead of night. See the kingdom burst into color at the speed of light. Freedom shaking up the atmosphere as the shadows fade into nothing as the day appears. Beyond the skies above, love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. Oh, we look to the sun, set our eyes on our Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Waking up to kingdom come, see the hope of heaven shining like the rising sun. Now forever lifted up from death to life. There's no fear in love and darkness in His endless light. Skies above, love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. Oh, we look to the sun, set our eyes on our Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. Beyond the skies above, love reaching out for us, the everlasting one, Jesus our God. Come on, oh, we look to the sun. Set our eyes on our Savior, see the image of love, sing His praises forever. Oh, we look to the sun, set
Good morning, everybody. It was so wonderful to hear you sing. You can take a seat. Thanks so much for being here this morning. My name is Sophie. I'm a student and volunteer here at Northeast, and there is no place I would rather be than here this morning with you. So thank you for spending your time with me. Like I said, my name is Sophie, and I am so glad to have you here. This morning, there are two ways for you to connect with us. The first is in a little white card, either in the seat back in front of you or on your table, called a Connect card. If you want to get to know us, because we want to get to know you, you can fill it out, leave it on your table, drop it in one of those boxes in the back. We would love to hear from you, to pray for you, to talk with you. We just want to get to know you better. Another way you can connect is through an event called Discover Northeast that's coming up pretty soon. This is an opportunity for people who want to get to know us, for people to get to know the staff. If you want to become a member here or come more regularly, this is the place for you. On June 4th, right after our service, food and childcare are provided, which is an extra plus. So bring your kids and an appetite because it's a wonderful, wonderful time of connection and getting to know each other. You guys might know, but this summer we are switching to one service at 10 a.m. It's going to be a really, really exciting experience where all of us, both services as a church community, get to come together and spend time together, worship together, come closer to God as a group. It's going to be amazing. So if you are able-bodied and you would be willing to park maybe further in the back or downstairs, we would love to have you do that for us so people who need to park a little bit closer to the building can. That would be absolutely amazing. And in the hour before our one summer service, we're having a connect time in our cafe where you can come and meet some new people, people from the first service who you may not have met before. I always love to say strangers are just friends you haven't made yet. So this is an opportunity for you to meet some strangers and make some friends. Thanks for being here today. You guys can stand up, turn around, say hi to somebody next to you, tell them their hair looks great.
Well, trust me, I wish I had all of your hair. So.
I'm trying to grow a bullet. It's not, is it one bullet? Yeah, kind of. I need to get the sides cleaned up, but I have to keep all of that.
Yes, that's great. I like what you did with the top of it. It's really cool.
Thank you.
Really, really.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson. Donna's husband. Is that Dan? I don't know him. Oh, but of course I see Donna with him. Okay.
Everyone
Your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater. Your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater. Your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater. Your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me. Your love is greater. Your love is stronger. Your love awakens, awakens, awakens me.
Amen. Just to shut God into the deepest internal parts this morning, all the way through us, entirely into us, so we change from the inside out. A thousand times I failed, still your mercy remains. And should I stumble again, still I'm caught in your grace. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. Will above all else, my purpose remains. The art of losing myself in bringing you praise. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. In my heart, in my heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Yeah. Lord, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out, Lord. Let justice and praise become my embrace, to love you from the inside out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. And the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out. Everlasting, your light will shine when all else fades. Never ending, your glory goes beyond all fame. And the cry of my heart is to bring you praise from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out from the inside out. Lord, my soul cries out. Glory to God. Amen. Go ahead.
So I recently got out of school for the summer, and I'm a very routine-oriented person. I love waking up in the morning and getting ready and reading my Bible and then leaving. And being out of school kind of messes with my routine. So I've been struggling and feeling a little bit detached from the world and from God. And so this week, I attended a worship service in hopes that it would reconnect me to my friends and with God. And it did. Good news. The speaker talked about how spiritual practices like those of worship and communion are meant to reconnect us with God in the middle of scattered seasons. It's a time to spend with God and to zone in on the one that matters. I spent the hour worshiping and praying with my friends, but focusing on how the Spirit was moving in the room. The time that we spend together this morning celebrating communion is a time that you can refocus on the one that matters, to zone in on the goodness of his sacrifice for us and what it means for the future. This is a busy season for a lot of us, getting out of school, finishing tests for parents, sticking it out until finally it's summer. In the middle of a busy season, you can take the next 4 or 5 minutes to focus on Jesus and his goodness. He can lift distractions, calm hearts, and quiet minds. He will prepare a space of peace for each and every single one of you. As you enter in this time, meditate on a psalm of comfort and peace. Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will feel no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me for all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Let's enter into a time of communion together.
think you dropped that. Mid-strum somewhere, we lost a pick. That's how passionate he is about worship. He just went on with no pick. It's amazing. Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for joining us this weekend. I want to welcome those who are joining us online. Quickly, I want to say, I meant to bring a little brochure with me. But Italy, we have an Italy trip coming up at the end of September, October. And if you're interested in that Italy trip, we're going to have an information meeting on June 18th. That will be in the season where we have one service. So at 9 a.m. on that Sunday, June 18th, we're going to be meeting back here in this corner. And just so you know, this summer when we move to one service, which will be on the 11th, there will be, the cafe will be moving to this lobby. So as you leave today, you'll notice there's some construction happening because we're building a new kind of cafe space here. And the cafe will be here, and the cafe tables and everything will be kind of in the room here. And that'll all be what's happening between 9 and 10. And so we want to encourage you to come be a part of that. And so on June 18th, I'll be having a meeting over in this corner for Italy information. It's just an information meeting, no pressure. But just so you know, that's coming. And it's at 10 a.m. The service is at 10. The kind of the community time's from like 9 to 10. So I've already heard from a lot of people about the service because 9 o'clock people are mad that it's at 10. And the 11 o'clock people are mad that it's at 10. So, I mean, it really checked the box for me because what I wanted to do was just make everybody mad. So I think we've done that. Everyone has given me their opinion about the service time. We were trying to find that middle ground so that 9 o'clock didn't win and 11 didn't win. So congratulations, you all lost. And it's at 10. No, we think it's going to be a great time because it gives us some time to kind of hang out in the beginning because we know that people don't hang out typically at the end. There's a little bit at the end, but most of the time people are just on their way. So we want to give some time in the beginning from 9 to 10 to kind of hang out, and we're going to do some theme things. There's going to be a whole new drink menu, just so you guys know, a whole other summer drink menu. Like we're talking about some cold brew stuff, and we're talking like crazy. Some iced teas, it's going to be all just for the summer. Special. I know, I can see it in your eyes. You guys are excited about it. So just so you know, that's coming. We're in a series where we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount and the call to kingdom living that Jesus made clear was in this Sermon on the Mount. Matter of fact, last week, if you were here, we talked about the Beatitudes, or Tracy covered the Beatitudes, but in verse 3 of Matthew chapter 5, Jesus talks about the kingdom, the reward of the kingdom, and then again in 10 he speaks about the kingdom, and it's kind of this sandwich of the Beatitudes, it's kind of sandwiched on this talk about the kingdom, because the whole message of the Sermon on the Mount is about the kingdom. Like we often take the Sermon on the Mount, and many of you have probably heard about the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard parts of the Sermon on the Mount because we tend to focus on just a little chunk here and a little chunk there. But we've rarely taken the whole picture of the grand scheme of the Sermon on the Mount and what Jesus intended in this message. And I want you to get, like his audience on that day were people that thought they kind of had it all figured out. The way they did their worship, the way they did their church service is probably similar to what you and I have experienced maybe growing up in church. I don't know about you, but when I started to go to church, I recognized that there was a change that people were asking of me. Like I could not do the same things I used to do and fit in with this group of people. There was a kind of expectation that I would look different, be different, act different if I was going to be a part of this community. And so I learned pretty quickly in church that people wanted me to do certain things for certain reasons. And whether I felt I should do it or not, I felt like in order to fit in, I had to act a certain way. Maybe that's been your experience. Maybe you grew up in a church where you had to kind of act a certain way. You kind of felt judged in that space or in that community. It's probably somewhere, if you've had a long history of the church, somewhere there's probably a history where there was some faking it in order to be a part of something. That's how I felt. I felt I had to kind of fake some stuff in order to feel like I was a part of the community. And when Jesus is teaching to this group of people, he's got people who are religious leaders. He's got people who've kind of figured it out. They write the rules. They set themselves up as the example of what God followers should look like. And there's a lot of people that were looking at them and saying, man, if that's the standard, I better just kind of fake it because I don't think I'm making it. Anybody else ever been there? And so the relationship you could have in the church, and maybe this is your experience, if you've got a long history of the church, it's probably an experience where you either you have felt like you had it kind of figured out. You were the good person or the right person. That might have been your posture at the time. Or you probably felt a little bit of guilt and shame all the time because you never quite measured up
to the standard in which you had to kind of fake who you were. And so that's this group that Jesus is teaching to. There's people who are living the life, but they're probably not. They're just kind of faking it, or at least acting like they are the ones who are, doing it right. And then there's a whole heck of a lot of people who are just kind of faking it and trying not to get caught if they weren't living the life. And so Jesus enters into this framework of talking about religious life and what it means to be right with God. He enters into that space and he starts talking about a whole new way of understanding what a right relationship and a right standing with God look like. And so it was radical. It was like so foreign. It blew their minds. I'm confident that when they were sitting there listening to Jesus teach, he was blowing their mind about the way he was taking the framework of everything they thought they kind of had a handle on. They had their rules and their parameters and these instructions, and this is the way we live. And then Jesus came in and just threw a hand grenade in all of it and blew it all up. And so it was very unsettling. I don't know if you've ever traveled in a foreign place, but oftentimes if you travel in a foreign place, you go to somewhere that's different, that's not normal, you'll notice pretty quickly that things are just different. And there are things that you didn't even know were different because you just didn't know. So I was in Italy driving a rental car, and I didn't know. I was just driving it like I normally drive. I'm just driving. Sometimes my GPS would tell me that I was in some sort of zone, and I'm like, I didn't even know what it meant. So I didn't know what to do with it. It would tell me I was in the zone. I'm like, I don't know. My wife was like, should we be concerned about that? I'm like, no, I don't even know what it means. And so I just drive right through these zones, okay? Well, I get the car back to the rental place. I get home. I'm thinking everything went great. No crashes, no dents, no scratches. It was beautiful. A few weeks after I got back, I got a notice from the rental car company that I had traffic violation. I never got pulled over. I didn't know I had a traffic violation, but I had a traffic violation. So they charged me for having a traffic violation. Thank you very much, rental company. I have no idea how that cost them, but they thought it cost them something, and that I needed to reimburse it. So I paid them, and then they said I would be getting a ticket in the mail. And so I waited. It kind of got in the back of my mind, because it took 11 months for the ticket to find me in the mail. I get an envelope. It's from the Vatican. I get an envelope from the Vatican. I open it up. I'm thinking it might have been the Pope wanting me to speak at that summer thing they were doing, but I wasn't sure, so I opened it. Sure, it was my ticket. It was from the Vatican. It was a ticket in another city. It was crazy. Anyway, but I had driven in a lane that was reserved for buses. It just looked like a lane to me. It was available. I took it. And I apparently wasn't allowed to. They had a picture of me driving the rental car. It was clearly me. It was clearly the car. Hi. I was like, I'm on vacation. I had that face, like I was enjoying myself, violating the law. Because oftentimes I think if we're in foreign places, we don't even know. You could be breaking the law and not even know it. You could be breaking a cultural norm and you don't even know it. You could be, you're tasting a food and it's so strange and different to you, and your reaction to it, they don't understand it because this is like a delicacy to them. This is something special they're serving you, and then your response to it is acting like it's gross, and they're like, how is it gross? It's the same reason. Like people come here and they go like, you serve them something beautiful and gorgeous and incredible, like Reese's Puffs, and they're like, what's this strange thing? And you're like, how do you not love it? It's amazing, right? And they don't think it's amazing. We think it's amazing because it's foreign. It's different. Well, when Jesus is talking, I want you to understand that he starts to say things that sound so foreign to people that it feels uncomfortable. And I'll be honest, chances are when we read the Sermon on the Mount, it feels so uncomfortable to us. Even today, the things we read Jesus is saying here, it feels uncomfortable to us because the framework of how we've kind of crafted religious life still has a bit of the same taintedness that this crowd had about what it meant to be right with God, about following rules, about believing that somehow by following the rules that we could be right with God, that we were in a better standing with God if we were the rule followers. That still permeates today. It still finds its way into our thinking. So when we read what Jesus talks about, it still feels a little bit foreign. And so I want to invite you into reading the Sermon on the Mount with us with the perspective of like, let's get this right. If we're going to be a part of this new kingdom that Jesus talks about, then let's get this right. Let's make sure that we are these people that Jesus really was saying, like, look, this is who you should be if you're a part of this new kingdom. We can't miss this. And so Jesus starts by talking about the Beatitudes, which is kind of like the character, the attitude of someone who is a part of this new kingdom. And just so you know, a little secret, the Beatitudes aren't all different people. Blessed are those who mourn. It's not like he's talking about a list of people. Oh, there's a mourner. Oh, there's someone who's hungry and thirsts for righteousness. Oh, no, he's talking about one person. This is the characteristics of one person who is pursuing this life in the new kingdom. This is what we look like in our attitude and spirit. And then he starts to poke into what would be very difficult for them to hear, because he was poking into all the things that they had as the norms of how to be right with God. And so this was like when it was getting like, he's getting personal now. When he's talking about the Beatitudes, it just seemed weird. Like, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the poor in spirit. That just sounds like foreign. Like, okay. So it's not the blessed are the people who are mourning? Like, what? Yeah, in the kingdom, that's what it's like. And then he starts poking into the things that they believed made them right with God. So with that introduction, let's start reading from Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. And I want you to get this. Jesus starts with basically this premise that the law is in full effect. Okay, the law is in full effect. We need to know this. Do not think I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Okay, so off the top, I know some of you may have grown up in the church or grown up in a way where you kind of felt like, hey, you know, with the law and the Ten Commandments, that's all like the Old Testament. I'm like a Jesus person, and so I don't follow those rules, you know. For me, it's all about robes and sandals. You know, I'm new. I'm the New Testament person. And Jesus says, look, don't think that I'm trying to come here and tell you that the law doesn't exist anymore, because the law is in full effect. And I've come to not abolish it, but to fulfill it. Now, when he talks about fulfillment, I need to just explain this to you. There's probably two things specifically he's talking about here. And that is that he came to fulfill the law, and that he came to answer it. He came to live it. So in Jesus is this perfect fulfillment of the law, and that here's someone who embodies the living of the law in a perfect way. And he ends up satisfying what the law requires for righteousness. He fulfilled it. And this is important for you and me who live by grace. Because if you're standing right now, in your spiritual standing, you think that you're going to stand before God because you follow the rules and that you're good enough and maybe a little bit better than someone else, then you're going to go to God and say, look, hey, I did the work. And God's going to look at you and say, hey, the law is in full effect. I just want to give you that reminder. I know, I did it. And he's going to be like, just a little secret here. No, you didn't. Go back and review your work. I'll let you turn it back in. Every time we bump into the law and we feel a conviction, it's God saying, hey, go back and review your work. Go back and you better make some changes. I know you think you're doing it, but you're not. This is God giving us his chances every time we bump into it. And we have this conviction in our spirit, in our heart about the law. It's God saying, look, hey, you're not getting it done. But here's the thing. Jesus is the fulfillment. It's because of what he did. So as New Testament believers, as new kingdom people, we have to lean into the fact that Jesus fulfilled the law. And then when it comes to salvation, when it comes to your salvation, you'll never get it done thinking that you can live by the rules, living by the law. Jesus did it. He fulfilled it. Good news, you don't have to. He did it. But he also fulfilled the law and that he lived it. In Jesus is the model of someone who lives this example for us of what it means to live out the law. It wasn't a life about rules. I think what Jesus was trying to say is, look, I'm fulfilling the law. Like, in me is the fulfillment of the law. So don't think that the law was God's way of saying, here's the rules, live by these rules. What he's trying to say is that God is intending for these good things that the law represents to be lived out in your life, and I am a fulfillment of that. So when you look at Jesus, if you want to say, look, I structure my life, I just want to be like Jesus and act like Jesus, well, then that's good. Because that's living out as a fulfillment of the law. It's loving God and loving other people. It's moving and acting like Jesus. And in that way, he fulfilled the law. But the law is in full effect. So if you think that your self-righteousness is going to get you somewhere, you're wrong. And I want to get to this. I'm not saying that sin doesn't matter. I've often said this. We have a problem in the church is that we tend to fixate on sin. What ends up happening, just like in Jesus' day, we tend to fixate on sin, and we tend to fixate on each other's sin or other people's sin, and we start to judge ourselves based on other people's sin and judging them, and we start to feel good about our righteousness or bad based on other people's sin, and we have a tendency to fixate on sin as in somehow our right living is going to make us more right with God. And so I've said, do not focus on sin. Do not center sin in your relationship with God. Don't do it. But I want you to hear this. Sin matters. It matters. It matters because our sin stands in complete contrast to the good things, the right things that God wants us to do. Our sin matters. Our sin is what causes us to harm other people, to hurt other people, to take advantage of other people. Our sin matters because everything we do that's sin nature, in our sin nature, tends to center ourself. We put ourself above other people. We put ourself in the middle of the narrative of our life instead of like a servant's posture and allowing God to do what he wants to do through us. So sin matters is because it pretty much takes us out of the game of living the life that God intends for us to, if we're kingdom participants. So sin matters. So pay attention, but don't center your life around it. When it comes to salvation, it's Jesus being the fulfillment. When it comes to you living out all the good things that God wants to live out through you, then sin matters. And pay attention to it. But Jesus goes on, he says this, and this is going to be one of those statements that they're looking around the room and going, he says this, for I tell you in verse 20, for I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay? So they were as they're listening to this, they're hearing this, and they're like going, wait a minute. You're saying that unless our righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, and so the teachers of the law, they're starting to hear, unless your righteousness surpasses them, and maybe they're like the fact they're being called out, but then they also don't like that they're basically being told that their righteousness is not enough. So just as an exercise, just take a moment here. I want you to just kind of glance around the room. And I want you to guess, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but who do you think is the holiest person in the room today? Don't look at the stage. I'm going to guarantee it's not me. So keep looking around. I don't know. You can pick a pick. I know everybody's afraid to look around. It's awkward, isn't it? But true, if we were to maybe do interviews or we were supposed to talk and somebody could say, well, I don't know, I guess I read my Bible every day and spend a lot of time in prayer. And I guess I can throw my hat in the ring for the holiest person. I mean, I didn't sin this last week. I had some sin in my past, but I've pretty much given up a life of sin. You know what I mean? We can make we can establish wow, you're holy, you're amazing. And Jesus would go, yeah, still not good enough. What? Even the holiest person in the room today, I want you to get this. If you thought it was you, if you were wanting to throw your hat in, I apologize. We're actually not going to do that. But hope I didn't crush anybody. But the truth is, if you thought, man, I got it pretty much together, Wayne, I'd like to be considered. Jesus is saying, look, it's not enough. Unless your sin surpasses that. It's basically saying, look, imagine the best person you know who's living that life, and then even if you could live up to what they're doing, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they had it down. I mean, they made up rules to protect themselves from the other rules so they didn't violate the bad rules. They made other rules. I mean, they had all kinds of rules. And then they would try to live it, and and then they told everybody about it. I mean, they kind of boasted about it. They kind of carried themselves in a way that everybody knew that, hey, we're getting it done. I mean, I spent a lot of time in prayer today. See how many beads I have? Those are my hours. I mean, it was impressive. And so the rest of the crowd is looking at them and saying, I have to be better than that? There was a guy by the name of Michael Jordan. Remember him? You got to be better than that. If it was be saying hey, if you want to be great in the kingdom of basketball, you got to be better than that guy. What? Better than that guy? Better than that guy. Imagine any field you're in, the best of the best. The person you would look at, the person who sets the standard. It's Jesus is saying, no, you got to be better than that. So this is so incredible how high he's raising the bar. Matter of fact, at the end of this section in verse 48, he says, look, be perfect as my heavenly Father is perfect. Be perfect. And so we bump up against that and we go, yeah, I can't. So just know that Jesus fulfills the law. He did it. We don't have to. But I also want you to know that we're invited into this incredible relationship. We're invited into this incredible opportunity to be kingdom participants. This isn't a message of like hopelessness and like, hey, people, you can't live by the rules, so just give up. No. Jesus is saying, look, don't think that by your salvation you can live by the rules, but understand, but the way you want to be, like the kingdom people that God is calling you to be, you can be. You see, God, in his redemptive plan for mankind, way back when he created humankind, he created us in his image. Why? Because he wanted to have some people on the earth that represented him. It was part of his plan from the very beginning. And he's had these different opportunities where he said, look, I want you to be my people. And now Jesus is saying, look, there's a new kingdom coming, and there's going to be these new people, and this is what they look like. And it doesn't look like what the religious leaders thought it should look like about following rules. And no. It's about being poor in spirit, about being humble, mourners, hunger and thirst for righteousness. These are kingdom participants. And so Jesus starts to say, look, you've heard it said. This is the way you've lived. This is the activity you thought made you right with God. And he starts to elevate what it means to be kingdom participants. This is what he says. Verse 21. Kingdom living, just so you guys know, I skipped a couple of the main points here, sorry. I get going, and then I realize, I should have said that. Our entry into the kingdom is based on Jesus' fulfillment of the law, not our own. That was basically my last point. If you didn't catch it, that was me stating it very clearly, okay? But here's the next thing. The kingdom living then that we're invited into, is basically doing the right thing that the law pointed to. Kingdom living is us doing the right things that the law speaks of. So the law wasn't abolished, it was fulfilled. And doing the right things is what the kingdom participants were supposed to be doing. It wasn't about following the rules, it was about doing the right things. And so Jesus pokes into this. He says, look, you've heard that it was said, in verse 21, to the people long ago that you shall not murder, and anyone who murders should be subject to judgment. So they're saying, okay, yeah, that makes sense. They're listening to this, and they're saying, yeah, that's what I was taught. Jesus was taught that too. They go to synagogue, they learn these things. You've heard it said, and then he'd quote what he'd heard in synagogue. You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. And they were like, yep, that sounds right. But he says, and this is a little tell, as you read through this section, you'll notice that Jesus says, look, you've heard it said, and then he says, but I tell you. And this should be a little clue for us that this is the part that's really important. When Jesus says, hey, you've heard it said, but I tell you, let that get your attention. But I tell you, anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's like anybody who murders somebody. And Jesus says, no. It's not just people who murder that are subject to judgment. It's people who are angry with a brother and sister. In other words, whatever caused that anger, whatever caused that road to murder, that's the thing that's wrong. That pathway, that corruption of your heart, the things that were stirring in you that led you to the murder is the wrong stuff. So Jesus makes it he elevates it a little bit, and he starts talking about it, not just the external act, it's the stuff on the inside that came out on the outside. And he uses an illustration of brothers and sisters, which I think was interesting, right? A brother or sister, he uses that language, because I don't know about you, but no one seems to hate each other more than brothers or sisters. Have you ever noticed that? There's just something like nobody gets a dander up like a brother and sister. I remember car rides where they would fight over just the space in the back seat was to be fought over. Because you always have one who's like a rule follower, and then you have an instigator. Anybody? You have an instigator who wants to push right up to the rules. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. That kind of stuff. And they just irritate each other. They're looking at my window. That kind of stuff. Like, come on. It's just like this. And this stuff takes root in us, and it just makes us so angry, and it leads to the murder. And so it's interesting in Scripture that the first murder is a brother who kills a brother. Because there is something about these close relationships, when we do relationships, when we allow this hatred in our heart, the stuff that takes root, the jealousy, the anger, the bitterness, whatever takes root in us that causes us to murder is the stuff that Jesus says, look, that can have no part of you. That's not okay. And I'm telling you, some of you guys need to hear this because I hear a lot of anger that comes out of Christian people and they think it's somehow justified. I hear this. I hear really angry things that come out about somebody who you have no relationship with, but they just don't agree with your ideology or your thinking or your politics, and you say really hateful things about people who think that way or people. And I'm just saying, I think you need to examine what Jesus is saying here. Because anger takes all kinds of forms. And he's saying it's not okay. Like a kingdom participant, and somebody who wants to take part in this new kingdom has to identify this and say, no, I can't let this be the way I think about people. It's not just the act of murder, it's the things in our heart that corrupt us, that move us to this. And so Jesus says it's such a big deal. Like when you're bringing your sacrifices, when you're going through your worship and you're bringing your gifts to the altar, if you have a problem or someone has a problem with you and you know this, then leave that stuff. Don't go through this. Don't go through the empty motion of bringing your sacrifices and doing your rituals when you know that there's something wrong in your heart. That's how much he cares about this. Leave it and make this relationship right. Over here on the wall, we have cards where people have admitted and recognized that there is relationships that are broken and sorry, I was debating whether I'm not going to say anything. Okay, but these cards over here have names on them, and they're relationships that are broken, and people are recognizing that, look, I want to make this relationship right. I want to make this right, but I know I can only do my part, and so I'm just going to ask that God do his. And so we've agreed as a congregation that we're going to pray for these cards, and it's kind of encouraging to see the cards move to the other board, which is where they're answered, like where we see that God moved, that God was involved, because we care about these things, and God cares about these reconciliations of relationship. This is new kingdom stuff, is that we're not okay with carrying bitterness and anger towards someone else. We're just not okay with it. Settle your matters quickly is what Jesus says. He goes on and says, look, it's not just about what you do with your body and murder, but it's also about your mind. He says, have you heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery? Like the act of adultery, they would be like, oh yeah, we don't commit adultery. But he says, I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. In other words, it's not just the physical act of adultery, it's the things that you do in your mind. It's the things that you dwell on. It's like looking at another person and sexualizing them. It's like having your way with them in your mind. It's not okay. Like God's not okay with that. Like understand that what ends up in our heart and what ends up in our mind ends up coming out of our life. We can fake it. We can say, I haven't committed adultery. But in the truth, you've dehumanized and sexualized somebody. And that's not okay. And Jesus goes on, he explains this relationship that we have with this really intimate act. And he says, look, don't ask somebody to create this vulnerability. Don't take somebody, the word looks there is like, it's a present participle, which means that it's like the looking and the go on, keeping on looking, okay? So it's not just that you looked. Because every one of us has these wow moments, the oh wow, oh wow. Like where you look and you go, oh wow, right? Anybody ever have a oh wow? You see something you shouldn't see, or you know that there's something there that you could look at, you could dwell on, but it's the oh wow. And it's what you do in that oh wow. Because he's saying, like, look, the oh wow is not where the sin happens. In other words, like when you have these like moments where you go, oh wow. It's when you go, oh wow, hey, all right, and you just dwell on it. It's the looking and the keep on looking that he's talking about. Because the right relationship we should have with this is that when we see something that's like, we're exposed to something that's meant to be intimate, that we protect that person and we protect ourselves by looking away. And not dwelling on them or sexualizing them by continuing to look. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, look, when you get this like, these moments of intimacy, this needs to be protected. And so I just want to say, like, young people, middle-aged people, older people, wherever you find yourself, understand that what Jesus is saying is like, he's not trying to like take something from you. He's not trying to withhold something from you in the things he instructs you about your body and the way you're supposed to enter into like intimate matters, but he's trying to save you from something, and he's trying to give you something, and that is that this is best done in a trusted, secure, safe place. Like, do not take from somebody something that's very vulnerable. Don't ask somebody to give something that's so intimate and vulnerable, and then you don't give them the courtesy or the kindness or the protection of being in a relationship where you will always trust and always protect and always consider them better than yourself. Like a marriage. That's why he says, look, this is the best place for this. And so he ends this section talking about divorce, not because he wants to make divorced people feel guilty for remarrying, but he wants to elevate marriage. And that it's so important that you do marriage right, and don't take this for granted, because you're going to share the most intimate thing and you're going to be vulnerable to somebody, and give them the courtesy of creating a safe place for this. Goes on. Again, you've heard it said, people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, don't swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne. And basically, they would make this a practice, and Jesus is kind of pointing to this practice where they would make an oath. They would swear oaths about business or their word. They'd go into the sanctuary, and over the altar they would make an oath, like basically in front of God, I'm gonna promise these things, and so you can trust it because I'm making this oath in front of God. And Jesus is saying, you don't need to do that. Like, kingdom people should, this integrity of the things that are in us, that's what comes out of us. And so even your words, like the way you handle your body, the integrity of your body, the way your heart is postured toward the world, like having the integrity that what's on the inside comes out on the outside. Even our words, like when you say something, means something. Like every word you say, if you say you're going to do it, you should have like imaginary stacks of Bibles you're saying it on. Because that's what it means. Like your yes be yes, your no be no. When you say it, you mean it. This is integrity in your word. He says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, this gets really hard. This is where it gets, for many of us, this is where it gets really uncomfortable. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. And I'll be honest with you, the more you have, the harder this is. It just is. The more you have, the harder it is to let go of, or to you feel like you have to protect things. And Jesus is saying, look, this is the posture of the kingdom person. Like if someone, you've heard it said, eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, and that makes sense to some people. This is what they would practice, this is what they would basically teach in the synagogue, that this is somehow God's way, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, because that always goes so well, doesn't it? You know, someone pokes you in the eye, you just poke them right back. That goes so well, because what happens is the person who gets poked in the eye pokes the person in the eye and then takes a tooth, and then the other person goes, hey, I didn't get a tooth. Then it always escalates. Anybody ever notice that? It always escalates. When somebody goes after a little bit of revenge, a little bit of this, it always escalates. I've been a part of student ministry for a long time, and I recognize if I started something, because I was really good at starting things. Some of my youth leaders would tell me it wasn't necessarily a good trait of mine, but I was always start things. I got this mind that always thinks of these little sinister things, and I think they're funny, and then I start it, and I think it's innocent. I do it with my family sometimes too. Like I was just with my family last weekend for a family wedding, and I just thought it was kind of fun, innocent. But I'll just, you take the straw and you kind of make it into little balls, and then I'll throw it at my nieces and nephews. I think it's hilarious. Their parents don't think it's so funny because then the kids they start throwing fries back. It always escalates. It always escalates. It always climbs, and to the point that I had to, as a youth leader, always go, okay, time, stop. Because it could never be regulated. It was never just an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. It was never like that. It was always like more. And so Jesus is saying, look, this revengeful life, do not get started in this. This is not the posture of a kingdom person. In other words, you people, you've heard it said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. I'm telling you that do not resist the evil person. And you'd be like, Wayne, but they're evil. I know. These aren't my words. If they slap you on the right, turn to the other cheek. Like, what? Like, this is not Jesus saying, look, hey, you guys just be punching bags, okay? No, he's saying, look, kingdom people are confident enough and humble enough and strong enough that if somebody abuses them, if somebody strikes them, that we don't strike them right back. It doesn't mean to stay in the reach of the blows either. I want you to be clear about that. But it doesn't mean that you just want to exact revenge, because that life is not the kingdom life. And so Jesus says, look, if somebody demands you walk a mile, then you walk the mile, and then you offer to walk a second. And there is power in a submissive posture. And that's what Jesus wants us to find. There is a power in a submissive posture where we will agree. Someone will just be angry and they'll want to be vengeful towards us, and then our posture to them is kind and deliberate and gracious. And so Jesus ends this section about generosity. He's like, look, don't withhold from someone. If someone wants to borrow, then you have a generous posture. It's not like we have this relationship with God. We're saying, like, what's the minimum? You know, like, what do I have to give? You know, I mean, what's the minimum to be right with you? No. It's the posture of generosity. That's what he's calling us to. He continues, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Love your neighbor. That's the theme here. But they would add, then hate your enemy. And unfortunately, this probably looks more like the church we've experienced growing up. Love the ones who love you and hate the ones that you feel are opposed to you. And Jesus would say, this is not kingdom living. And he says, basically, look, understand that the people that you look at and you look down on, the people that you think hate you, that they're blessed by God too. Same sun, same rain, same blessings to get food. That's all, that they're getting all that too. So don't think that you're somehow, like, he blesses them too. But the law then, like, for us, it's the righteous standard that God lays out. So the law is not abolished. It's the righteous standard we're invited into to live. And this is kingdom living. And so it's the right way to live. It's the right way to move. It's not about following rules. It's about doing the right thing. And so if you're wondering, like, what's the right thing? How do I know if it's the right thing? Then I wrote a couple of quick questions that I think are good, like, standard. If you ever, like, wonder, like, what would Jesus do in this moment? Is this the right thing? Does this seem to jive with the law? Then ask yourself this question. Will this activity, whatever I want to do, will it create a victim? In other words, if I win here, if I get my way here, does it create a victim of somebody else? Then it's probably not the way of the kingdom. Will this take advantage of someone else? Am I going to leverage a relationship? Am I going to take from somebody something that somehow is going to take something from someone else? Then it's probably not a kingdom posture. Do they lose so I can win? Does this consider them more than it considers me? In other words, do I consider them more, or do I somehow make them less in this? Does this serve someone? Does it demonstrate God's love for them? Does it, even if it costs me, does it demonstrate God's love for them? Then this is probably a kingdom activity. Does this reflect what I know, see, and understand about Jesus, his character, his way? Does it reflect his sacrifice? Because the truth is, when you look at the Beatitudes, when you look at what Jesus is kind of stacking up there in the Beatitudes, this is all one person, and this is all Jesus. Jesus in the Beatitudes kind of introduces this life of someone who blessed are those who blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are those poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn. And when you look at the Beatitudes, I would encourage you to do this. I would encourage you to take the Beatitudes this week and lay it against Jesus on the cross. Just consider what Jesus says about the Beatitudes, and then consider his way to the cross, his words on the cross, and you will see a reflection of the Beatitudes in his life. And because Jesus was this way, this is how he fulfilled the law for us. Because Jesus was able to take this kingdom posture, it made the way for us. He fulfills the law for us so that you and I can fulfill the law in our life. Because Jesus ends this section by saying, look, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And we can say, what? I can't be perfect. There's no way I can be perfect. But he invites us into a perfected life. You're right. Like, we cannot be perfect in our salvation and our earning of our salvation. But don't dismiss the opportunity to live a perfected life. This is the right way that we're supposed to live as kingdom people, to live as perfected people. And you won't do it perfect, but wouldn't it be great that if someone who doesn't know Jesus bumps into someone who does know Jesus and their experience is perfected. It feels a little bit more like heaven. It feels a little bit more like a godly thing. It feels a little bit more like someone who's willing to sacrifice themselves than take advantage of me. Wouldn't it be great that if everybody that bumped into someone who claimed Jesus had a kingdom perspective and a posture of self-sacrifice and service to the world in which we live? Because that is Jesus. And because he did that, you and I are invited in to that life. Pray with me. Lord, I thank you so much. I thank you for Jesus. I thank you for him, and it just blows my mind what he was willing to do for us. Being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be held on to, but he made himself nothing. And Lord, I pray that we would have the same posture, that we would examine ourselves and ask ourselves whether we're willing to humble ourselves, to soften our heart to what you want to do, to soften our heart towards others so that our posture could be a life of service and considering others better than ourselves, rather than considering ourselves more righteous and more worthy and more blessed. Lord, if there's something in us that doesn't see this the way we should, open our eyes. I just pray that you would this week open our eyes as we're confronted with this, so that we would understand the good news of being invited into this new kingdom, a new way. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Let's all worship together. You stood before creation, eternity in your hand. You spoke the earth into motion, my soul now to stand. You stood before my failure and carried the cross for my shame. My sin weighed upon your shoulders, my soul now to stand. So what can I say? What can I do? Offer this heart, oh God, completely to you. So I walk upon salvation, your spirit alive in me, my life to declare your promise, my soul now to stand. What can I say? And what can I do? Offer this heart, oh God, completely to you. So what can I say? And what can I do? But offer this heart, oh God, completely
the one who gave it all. I stand, my soul, Lord, to you surrendered. All I am is yours. I stand with arms high and heart abandoned, in awe of the one who gave it all. I stand, my soul, Lord, to you surrendered. All I am is yours. I stand with arms high and heart abandoned, in awe of the one who gave it all. I stand, my soul, Lord, to you surrendered. All I have is yours. I stand with arms high and heart abandoned, in awe of the one who gave it all. I stand, my soul, Lord, to you surrendered. All I have is yours. I stand, come on, arms high and heart abandoned, in awe of the one who gave it all. I stand, my soul, Lord, to you surrendered. All I am is yours. 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 Glory to God.
Listen, I want to thank the team, those who served today. If you served in the kids class, thank you so much. You know, this tends to be a kind of a weird Sunday for us. Matter of fact, we called in a favor. Our drummer today is from Houston, Texas, Carlos. He's here visiting friends and his grandparents, and we needed a drummer, so he was willing to show up and play for us. Blessings, my man. So did a great job. I know it was like kind of a Texas theme. I met somebody from San Antonio today. We had some other people from Houston, so it's crazy. It's like big Texas day today. Listen, I hope you're encouraged today. Continue to read the Sermon on the Mount. Give yourself some time for God to speak and work in you, because this kingdom thing is really important that we get this right. God's doing a new thing at Northeast, and if we're going to be this new kingdom place that we want to be, it's got to be us allowing him to have his way with us. So do not be like part of this crowd that wants to just assume we got God figured out, and I got this nailed down, Wayne. I got nothing more to learn. But adopt a posture of a mourning spirit who's willing to seek and hunger after righteousness and truth and understand what God has for us. You guys have a great week. God bless you guys.